It is a beautiful Thursday night in Washington, D.C. as we get set for the 10th AUDL Championship weekend. The National Mall, not far from Audi Field, which is overlooking the rooftop here at the Cambria Hotel, which is where we find ourselves on the eve of semifinal Friday. Hey everybody, Evan Lepler, Tyler Kinley, Charlie Eisenhood, Brian Jones. Many more voices to be heard from over the course of the weekend. And guys, we're here. It's the first time in like 25 months that we're on the verge of championship weekend. And I don't think anyone has any idea who's going to win, which makes it a lot of fun. Brian, you've been here before in a very different role. 2 years ago, you were coach of the New York Empire. Tell us what they're thinking about on the night before competition.
They're thinking about recovering and getting ready to battle because you have to be in a mindset to take care of game one, even though you've got two potential opponents this weekend. And for New York, it's kind of been this nice year where they've suffered some lumps. But I think this is a hungry team, and you've seen the competitiveness out of Jack Williams, Ben Yacht, Ryan Oscar, who's a new addition. It's just been really fun for them to watch, and if they can maintain that competitive fire, it's going to be a good weekend for them.
Charlie, is New York the favorite?
They're the favorite, but not as convincing a favorite as they were 2 years ago. I think clearly we've seen them. I mean, they almost lost in the playoff game to Atlanta just a week ago. So I think they have the most top-end talent of any of the four teams here. But I also think that their depth is not what it once was. And so that opens the door for the other teams to get a win. And I really think this is the most wide open it's felt maybe ever in the AUDL, with all four teams feeling like credible champions.
Tyler, I've talked about this with Charlie and Brian off the air, so I'm going to throw it at you on the air.
Yeah.
We were talking last night that the top three players at championship weekend are probably New York Empire. Do you agree with that?
It's a good question. The thing that I think we'll find out this weekend is are they? I mean, there's been times where they do look like the best players, some of the best players in the world, but all these teams have had sort of up and down performances during the course of the year and even during the course of some games. You know, New York has started off pretty slow in some of these games, gone down early, so I think they have the potential to prove that they are, but it's kind of up to how they perform come tomorrow.
First game tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the Growlers and the Empire. And then 7 o'clock, Raleigh and Chicago. Show you the championship graphic. I mean, Audi Field, we were over there today. It looks tremendous. The story of the playoffs so far has been crazy comebacks. Empire coming back from 5 down, Raleigh from 4 down. Chicago needed a 5-0 run in the last 5 minutes of the freaking game to get by Minnesota. San Diego looked like the most impressive team in their playoff game from start to finish. So why aren't the Growlers getting more buzz?
If you're asking me, I think it's because the West Division, to me, doesn't feel like it has the same depth, certainly as the Atlantic. And so, you know, San Diego looked weak at times during the regular season. And so when you kind of project ahead, it's like, okay, they beat a Dallas team that everybody thought might be the favorite, you know, coming into the season. But the problem is they weren't actually very good during the regular season. So what does that win mean? Certainly I don't have any questions about their offense. It's going to be a great offensive unit. They're going to do well against New York's defense. The question really, of course, is what can they do defensively against New York?
In San Diego's 2 home games against Dallas, I believe they only turned it over 21 combined times, 11 in one game, 10 in the other. So, I mean, those were their biggest games at home. Now, they lost in the second half at Dallas, but Jonathan Nethercutt changes the equation for the Growlers, doesn't he?
Yeah, when you're going into the playoffs and you're looking to pull a lever, that's a pretty good lever to pull. And especially because how seamlessly he fit in that playoff game. We've seen Nethercutt, he's a shooter. We know that he can sometimes shoot a team into a game and shoot a team out of a game. And what I thought was so impressive was that he was able to go join that offensive line and have so few mistakes and just work really well with Goose, work really well with the rest of the players in San Diego. And that's the thing I think for this team is that that's so impressive about San Diego is they're playing like maybe the best sum of their individual parts over anybody else. Right, New York has the star power. Raleigh's been bouncing pieces around. Chicago had to have that comeback, and San Diego just feels like a well-oiled machine going into these games and playing at their potential, which is really nice to see.
What do you think about the Growlers?
So I would agree with Charlie. The division itself doesn't seem to be as competitive as the Atlantic, but the Growlers just performed. I mean, they looked great. I think Nethercutt specifically, just like you said, he brings like this casual confidence that I think that they may have lacked or missed from the handler position. I think his ability to be completely calm going into the biggest moments. I mean, if you know him, he's hilarious. He's very calm, but he's completely dialed in. And I think that allows the rest of the team to just focus on playing their game. And you saw it. I mean, Goose had an outstanding game.
How about this play by Hunter Corbett?
Fantastic. I mean, he catches it inches off the ground. But again, they took it to Dallas. And frankly, the hard part to guess is Dallas didn't have a very good game. I mean, there are a lot of weird turns. So it's a big question mark about matching up. How do other teams match up against San Diego? It'll be seen. I really liked a lot of their choices. I thought they took unders really well. They took deep shots well. So it'll be, to me, about their choices.
Every other team that took a lead in their quarterfinal game blew it, except for San Diego. So credit to the Growlers. They're 11-2. I agree, they had kind of an up and down season, but I'm not sure we give their defense enough credit. And, you know, matching up against New York's big three, plus Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey and John Lithio and Ben Katz, they got a lot of horses. A lot of veteran horses. Steve Milardovich, Dom Leggio, Max Hume, Khalif El Salam, Michael Tran has been a really good defender this year for San Diego, and then Hunter Corbett as well. I think New York is going to be in for a bigger challenge than maybe they're anticipating.
I think the question is, can they challenge the New York Bigs? We saw Atlanta effectively do that through much of the game and put themselves in a position to win because they were winning the 50-50s. They were beating a team that mostly dominated its competition with size. And, you know, we watched New York able to, you know, just kind of sky people, literally, just go over the top. And that didn't work against Atlanta. Obviously, they come down with some huge plays at the end. Ben Yot makes maybe one of the plays of the season with the huge block at the end of the game. And then, you know, a saving grab in the end zone. But I think the thing about San Diego that's interesting is that they do have a lot of athletes and they do have size. Is it going to be enough to match up with the likes of Ben Yot and Jack Williams, Lithio? There's a lot of matchups you got to go all the way down the line. We'll see what they can do. I wonder schematically what they're going to do on defense, because I think if you try to go one-on-one with New York, you're going to lose. You have to find ways to mix it up, to go with a Z, to go with a junk, something, because they're going to win foot races one-on-one.
Brian, the New York-Atlanta game was just 5 days ago now. It'll be 6 days ago when the teams take the field tomorrow, which is a pretty quick turnaround, especially in the playoffs. Usually you have 2 weeks before championship weekend, but not this year. The Empire were down 5 in that game and didn't look great. I mean, how much should we be concerned about a kind of carryover hangover, or is it kind of like Chicago? You know, they got away with their off half, and now they're even more dangerous because they got that off half out of the way.
Well, I think it's tough. I mean, New York is almost their own worst enemy. I think in this situation, you know, they go into that Atlanta game, they get down 5. A lot of that is, sure, Atlanta has some really good playmakers, and Charlie, I agree with you, like they have the matchups in the bigs. But if New York is patient and they come out with the right mentality, they are going to be able to do a great job in starting out in these games. And so for them, it's a question of, you know, what is their headspace like? It was an emotional win. Jack Williams played 39 points in order to get the victory, to get the W.
And can San Diego make a play like that to kick things off? You know,
Right.
That's really what jump-started Atlanta. Matt Smith going for number 300.
I think this is a very similar game where San Diego is going to have to jump out to an early lead. I think if this game gets tied going into the fourth quarter, you've got to give the edge to the star power, because when you come down to the moments, you want Jack Williams with the disc. You want Ryan Oscar being able to throw with different release points and hit every slot in the field to Lithio, Yacht, and Babbitt if you need to. I mean, it's such a luxury to have. It makes coaching really easy, and I should know in 2019, when you get to an end of a quarter of a tie game, you're going to throw it up to Babbitt, you're going to throw it up to Yacht. You don't have to worry too much. Even against really good bigs, those bigs are going to do a good job. So it's a tough situation for San Diego. It's going to be tough sledding. they've got to find a way, like Charlie said, to mix it up early and build that lead, because otherwise I don't see how they can pull it off.
I'm going to throw this out of left field, Brian, just because Adam Ruffner asked me this question this week, and you're a better person to ask as we watch these crazy highlights and that great knee from Ben Katz. If Jeff Babbitt took over Ben Yacht's role on the New York O-line, what percentage of Yacht's stats would Babbitt get?
I think he'd get a lot of goals and a lot of jump balls, but Jeff has a disdain for turning the disc over to the point of making the offense run. And that's like one of the things that makes Jeff really good in pressure situations, is that he is not going to take the unnecessary risk and he's going to move it around. And Yacht really likes to huck the disc and open up the field, and you got to give him credit because he had 0 turnovers in that game against Atlanta. But we've seen it before, and we see this block from him now. It's incredible. Every time it seems like this year Yacht has given the disc away, he makes a play like that to get the disc back.
I might have saved the season. What an incredible play.
That was one of the most unbelievable plays I've seen of the year. The crazy thing that you said about Babbitt and turns is he almost had one of the most monumental turns in this game. We're watching it right now. This forehand, that again, another monumental play from Yacht here.
I mean, it should have been a turnover.
Should have been turned. That catch
Would have been his first of the season.
Very few people make that catch with that length. And again, I mean, it's been remarked before, but the shape of the disc, it just makes it tougher to catch. And it's knifing in there. I mean,
Unbelievable.
It was an unbelievable play.
Yacht had himself a game. And the thing is, you kind of got to expect he's going to have another one of those. And that's the hard part. I think watching San Diego play Dallas, Kevin Richardson had himself a game as well. I mean, he's their big, and he was getting open a ton. And the problem is they sort of have 2 to 3 K-Riches at this point. So just like you said, Charlie, it's going to be what do they do strategically to deal with that?
In the history of championship weekend, the semis and finals, and maybe dating back to 2013, although this might go back to 2012 too, there have been 3 instances where a player has double-digit plus-minus in a game in championship weekend. Yacht has 2 of the 3. The Dallas game in 2018 and the San Diego game. Was it the San Diego game or the final? Maybe the Dallas game. No, there's both Dallas games. Both the final, he was plus 11, I believe.
And no turnovers in the championship game, and that's where you like him to be. He knows how to turn it on. New York, these guys being around them, they're just incredible competitors. And that's one of the things where, like, if they're in the game, I don't think there's anybody else in the world right now you'd rather trust a disc with than Jack Williams. He can make the tough throw. He's done it in overtime several times this year. He did it back in 2019. And we talk about Yacht because he makes such amazing plays and he has a lot of the yardage stats. We talk about Oscar because he has the assist numbers and the big throws. But Jack Williams, when times get tough, that's who you can go to. Because if you can take away the bigs in New York and you can slow down Oscar, that leaves Jack Williams. And we saw Atlanta try to use John Stubbs on him, and I don't know that he slowed him down that much. And John Stubbs is an excellent, excellent defender.
Yeah.
Charlie, how concerned are you about Elliot Chartok in the New York O-line?
It's funny that you bring it up because I was about to ask the question myself. After the game last week, I think you have to have a little bit of concern, and I know that he went to the coaching staff before the game and was kind of dealing with like a little bit of an injury and was saying, hey, if I can't feel like I can contribute, don't feel bad taking me out of the game. And I wonder if that played into some of the turnovers that we saw. I think the question, of course, is that a typical performance from him? And I would say no. I think for the most part, he hasn't been perfect. He's not the best center handler in the league. It's definitely a question mark position for the New York offense, and it has been since the start of the season, when we knew they weren't going to have Harper Garvey back. And is it a problem? Maybe. I think the thing is, when the going gets tough, they put the disc in the hands of the big 3, and those guys have gotten the job done all season.
39 points for Jack Williams. I forget exactly what I wrote in the Tuesday toss, but it was something like 27 of the final 31 points of the game he played, like from the midpoint of the second quarter to the end, which is just insane. We haven't seen that stuff before in an AUDL game from one of the top players when it really matters.
So he's been doing it, U24s, he did it, the U.S. national team, and he just he's a big-time, big-game player.
One of the hard parts, I think, talking specifically about that, is this is a long weekend. And without depth, at some point, coaching staff has to start thinking about, we have a game tomorrow, how much do we have in the tank, what do we need to do this game to win? I mean, you got to win the first one, but you also want to win the second one. And, you know, how much gas do these guys have in the tank? I think you'd love to say he's endless, right? I'm sure he'd say I'm endless. But as a coaching staff, you have to take that stuff into account. That's going to be tough for New York.
As a coach 2 years ago, jumping out to a pretty healthy lead against Indy that they cut into late.
Right.
When did you start thinking about Sunday's game against Dallas?
When we were up pretty big. I mean, at that point, you're up pretty big in that moment, and you want to use everybody you have at your disposal because you just want to have as much energy going into the finals. And that's a great point exactly about it's not endless, right? New York can get themselves into trouble here, and that's why it's like they cannot have that same start against Atlanta if they reasonably expect to win a championship, right? If they go face a pretty good Raleigh or Chicago team, let's say they win this game, but they have another comeback to do it, I mean, it would be just incredible. We talk about that being 27 out of 31 points being incredible. Repeating that would be just tenfold of whatever we just saw.
Quick reset. We're 15 minutes in already. Evan Lepler, Tyler Kinley, Charlie Eisenhood, Brian Jones here in Washington, D.C. We got Audi Field behind us. Nationals Park is just like a couple hucks that way. It's beautiful. We got 2 semifinals tomorrow. We've been talking about San Diego, New York. We also got a Canada Cup championship game today. I learned $5,000 on the line. Winner of this game gets $5,000.
Okay.
The 3-5 Toronto Rush against the 6-2 Montreal Royale. We'll give our thoughts on the Canada matchup in about 9-10 minutes. But let's jump into Raleigh, Chicago, and let's talk about Raleigh. Look, like, they're here, which is a huge win for them, but I doubt they'll be satisfied because they had been here before. It's been a long time. I don't know, aside from Eric Taylor, who's among the top 15 players at championship weekend from Raleigh. But as I was chatting about with Brian before, their depth, just I'm taking Raleigh to win. I'll say it right now. I think Raleigh's going to win the whole thing.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
That's bold. But I mean, it's definitely possible. As you said, they've got that depth. Not everyone's top to bottom, I think, got what Raleigh has. And to me, thinking about that capability going into this weekend is you're playing teams you haven't played before, and so the ability to adjust mid-game, they've been moving Eric Taylor back and forth from lines, they've got a lot of pieces to move around, and they've got a good coaching staff. I mean, I think given their adaptability in games that they haven't seen and teams that they haven't seen, it can be a huge edge.
Well, the thing that's interesting about Raleigh, by the way, you said nobody in the top 15. I think Anders Jungst is starting to prove that he might belong in that group. His last few games have been very impressive. I think what I find really interesting about Raleigh is that, you know, we've seen them really grow from the beginning of this season when they take that opening game loss, and it's like already like, whoa, you know, what's the problem in Raleigh? And they really didn't look that good at the beginning of the year, but they got progressively better, and they got better, and they got better. And yes, they lost some close games down the stretch. You know, they lose a game they should have won against New York, and you know, they go down early against DC in the playoffs, and then boom, they, you know, find the comeback and start to get the rhythm going, and they really did look like the better team over 4 quarters against a DC team that, you know, has played really well against them and seemed to match up really well with them. So I think the thing about Raleigh is, you know, who is going to take the disc in their hands and win the game when they need to? Because if they're in a close game late, that's where, like, you know, New York has an edge. I know they're not playing this first matchup, but they got up to the point where they didn't have to have that late game heroics, but I wonder who the late game heroics come from. That's my question about Raleigh.
And it's a great point because you saw the end of the game where they had that late miscommunication in dump space that almost led to DC getting back into the game. You're right. Raleigh has to kind of win these games by 2 or 3 to make it comfortable because they have that edge in the depth. And you alluded to, Tyler, about Eric Taylor being moved around. Elijah Long played a little bit of I saw as well. And when you have all those pieces, that's how you have to maximize your depth. It's got to be a true team victory, I think, for Raleigh to win this weekend. What I think is really interesting narrative from Raleigh's perspective is they've vanquished 2 out of the 3 foes that got them early in the season. Atlanta got them early in the season. They had a 5-0 comeback in order to vanquish them in the regular season. And then DC beat them twice, and they figured out a way to do it in the playoffs. The team that got them otherwise is New York. And, you know, if you see a New York Raleigh final, you got to wonder what's in the tank for that. But they have the depth because if they win this game, this first one against Chicago, they should be, to Evan's point, they're going to be the freshest team available on Sunday.
Now, there's that mistake that I mean, everybody in the stadium was like,
You know what? I thought Denardis gave a great answer, though, when you asked him about it after the game. And I forget exactly. I didn't use the quote in the Tuesday toss, but he basically was like, I wasn't worried about it. Even if they score there, we're up 1 with a minute to go. We're receiving the disc. I'm still confident in my team. And look, that was their 10th turnover for the entire game and their last, as few as they've had all year. Defensively, they flustered DC in the second half. Flustered might be an overly strong word, but we haven't seen too many teams slow DC's offense down, and Raleigh did. So the question I have for you, Tyler, our Midwest expert, Pavlianis, leading Chicago's offense against Raleigh's D-line. In what ways can Raleigh trip up Chicago, do you think?
Well, I think they're going to game plan intelligently a lot based on that wind chill game. There's not as much that they can go off of because, frankly, the Chicago team just underperformed. But they were picked apart. Defensively, Chicago sagged a bunch, and the wind chill just took easy options over and over. Frankly, until the middle of the fourth quarter, they didn't really cinch up. Back to Pavel, I've seen him be incredibly successful when he drives up line. I mean, he is incredibly good at it. He's quick, and he'll take a lot of options. The best situation, I think, is for him to consistently be given the disc, but backwards, and really try to limit and front guys like Paul Arders, like Keegan. I think Pavel can shoot. I don't think it's his first option. I think he likes to distribute the disc. I think he likes to break the mark. And if you force him to be more of a shooter, I think that's putting a burden on him that may prove advantageous. We'll see what they do. I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because frankly, Pavel has been hard to stop.
Yeah, I think the thing that concerns me for Chicago in this matchup is that Raleigh's handler defense is extremely good. They showed it against DC. It's why they won the game, I think. They were able to create pressure in the backfield space, and they just sat behind over the top. They had David Richardson sit in the back of the zone,
right,
and just say, "Okay, you want to shoot it? I'll be back here."
Right.
And so beat us with your handlers, and then we're gonna stick on you, and it worked. I mean, it really did. It took some time to get going. They had
Sure.
to figure things out in that first quarter. They went down because their offense was making some mistakes.
Sure.
But then they were clearly the better team. So can they apply that same pressure to Giannis and what is otherwise not as good of a handler core? I think so, and I think that's why Raleigh has the edge in this matchup, is at the handler position on both sides, because offensively they also have fantastic handlers that are going to be able to continue to possess the disc even against that Chicago zone, and the zone didn't work against Minnesota. So do they go back to it? Do they abandon it? It's hard, I think, if you're Chicago to come out of that game and be like, wow, what did we do wrong? Was it just a lack of urgency, or are there actual schematic things? And I'm curious to what you have to say as a coach. Like, are you seeing problems that they need to fix, or was it just energy and effort?
Yeah, well, if you know me, I love the poaching, right? And Chicago's been doing that in an excellent way for a lot of the season. But one of the downsides of that is when you play in space, you don't bring the same level of energy that you might want at the start of a playoff game. Like, these are emotional affairs throughout the course of the game. And so Chicago turned the tide by switching off the poaching defense and just saying, we're going to bludgeon you in the same way New York. Exactly, like the same way New York kind of will with their star power at the end of the game. And that's how they went on that 5-0 run, is just being able to bring that person defensive pressure.
It's still hard to watch from a Minnesota perspective.
It is. I mean, it's just one of those things where it was like the confluence of like a couple of really bad mistakes by Minnesota and some really good pressure.
But you see right there, like, they finally shut down the reset and they got an easy stall 6 turnover.
Right, and we know that in big moments, Chicago's defense is going to be able to bring it. And you guys, I think, were spot on with the matchup that these handler defenders from Raleigh battling against Pavel. And I think, to Tyler's point, right, Raleigh is going to be able to push Pavel backwards. I think we're going to see that. Like, I think that's unquestionably going to happen based on the defenders they have, the savvy with Noah Saul. I thought Seth Weaver played really great, who's another depth defender for Raleigh. And
Seth's going against his old team.
That's right. It's going to be a fun matchup. I think what's really key here is like what becomes kind of option A for Chicago potentially is Paul Arders. I think, this kid has been starting to be talked about over the last few years, but he is growing still.
I thought he was their best player in this game on offense.
He's very dynamic, and he's one of those players that can kind of take the load off of Pavel. It's going to be a two-man show, I think, if they're going to get it done.
Arders was their best player against Madison on July the 30th, that Friday night. We got to transition to Canada in a moment, but the Raleigh Flyers, basically in the last 40 days, have played 5 really important games. Boston, New York, Atlanta, DC. Chicago in the last 40 days has played 1 important game. They played Detroit twice, not important, and the Minnesota game in the playoffs. That's got to matter, right?
I can't agree more. The big question for Chicago is, what's your attitude coming into the game? I mean, there was a complete lack of urgency, and I think when you watch these AUDL games, you see, in some of the field, you don't see all the field. And I think the lack of urgency is somewhat the defensive players off screen aren't that tight. So I think that that's what they really cinched up on at the end of the game. But, I mean, if you're coaching Chicago, it's no longer like a happy game time speech. I mean, you got to light a fire, and it's got to start from point one. And they have the players to win the game. They have the players maybe to win the game handily. It comes down to how do you start and continue through the game, because clearly that's an issue.
I have to say, I think that it won't be a problem for them. I think they were already thinking about championship weekend when they played Minnesota. They were just, they assumed they were going to win the game. You could see in the body language, you could see in the attitude in the game, they really didn't even think they were going to lose until 7 minutes to go in the fourth, when they were like, oh, we actually have to play now?
Right.
And then they proved that they were the better team. And yes, Minnesota gave up some freebie turnovers, but Chicago's not going to do that against Raleigh because they have respect for them as an opponent. I think Chicago's thinking the same thing as everybody else. Our division is weak. We're the best team here. We're going to go to championship weekend. They've been thinking it since week 1. So is it enough to be ready to play and be focused when you haven't been tested? I mean, that's the question. But I don't think they're going to come out flat. I think if they lose, it's probably going to be because they just get outplayed, not because they didn't show up.
I think this is going to be an interesting game because I think both defenses can create an advantage, right? We like Raleigh's handler defenders. We know that Chicago has plenty of playmakers on defense, and we saw them turn it on. So if they come out with that fire on point one, I don't think Raleigh's offense has been unshakable. I think they've had moments where they went down 8-4 to DC. I think you could very well see a run from both teams throughout where first, quarter by quarter, it belongs to the other team. And so it's just a matter of defensively who can punch and counterpunch at the right time. It's going to be kind of tactical, right? We know that Mike DeNardis can pull strings, change things up. We know that Chicago likes to poach, and Tyler, you talked about them playing loose, and that's kind of, they like to play switchy and have these poach blocks. You saw them play that hard person. You're going to need both. You're going to need to switch tactics every 3 to 5 points. Not one thing is going to work, right? If you give Pavel a certain defense for too long, he's going to figure it out. Same thing with that Raleigh offense, with Saul Yannick, with Matt Guchohannes. You can go ahead and get a run for 3 or 4 points, but these teams are going to adjust. And so who can do that going into the second half? That's going to be critical.
Well, I apologize for walking in front of the camera. I just realized I did that, so that's my bad. Our great production crew. We got an AUDL game just a couple minutes away, the Montreal Royale, the Toronto Rush. Brian, you've coached against both those teams before. We've seen a lot of great games between these two rivals. You've lost to them before. Who's going to be the player of the game tonight in the Canada Cup finale for $5,000? Brian, who's your pick?
How can you go against Cam Harris, who threw for 1,000 yards? I mean, that's an incredible 1,000-yard game. The guy has incredible hucks, and he's had that for 12 years, and that's just his superpower is that low-release flick huck. He just can put it out there every time on a platter, and that's nothing new. Out of their set plays, it's been a stalwart for just however long, and I've lost plenty of times to Toronto to know that, so it's watch out for Cam Harris.
It's crazy how long he's been doing it too, but yeah, I think Toronto's been a little shaky in the Canadian action, but I still think they're going to show up and win when it really counts. And maybe it's time to start shifting our thinking about Toronto, but I need to see it proved first. I need to see Montreal prove that it's time that they're okay, no, Toronto's not the best city. in Canada for Ultimate anymore. But I mean, yeah, Cam Harris is exactly the person that comes to mind for me. Can just bomb it out there.
Montreal 4-0 against Toronto this season, but you're taking the Rush tonight.
I don't know. I get it. The games have been close. I think that Toronto, when it counts, is going to show up.
AUDL.tv is your site for this Canada Cup final. The broadcast officially beginning now. We're going to stay on for the next 10, 12 minutes or so and watch the start of the game with you, and then we'll cut off our broadcast and you have to transition to AUDL.tv. You have thoughts on the Royale and the Rush?
I agree. I think the Rush have looked shaky. I mean, you watch their games, it's not that they're getting pressured into turns. Sometimes the turns just come out of nowhere. And you're at championship weekend. I mean, you can't have that and win the game. Montreal's got a much stronger record. Again, though, comes down to one game. You got to prove it, but it does seem like the table shifts in Montreal's favor. I would take Montreal.
Okay.
Just got a word from our producer, Agent Shapiro Layton. According to the production slab, the game is delayed. We're not sure for how long. It may not be as nice of a night as it is here in D.C. Sasha Płat-Sokolski, number 1 in the entire AUDL in goals per game this season. And he's not going to be Montreal's best player tonight. Montreal's best player tonight is going to be Kevin Quinlan.
Yeah.
And that's why the Royale are going to win the game. Ultimate veteran, pun intended. He has been in tons of big games throughout his career. You've played before. He's played with you. He's been against you.
Right.
And he's a big game guy.
He's a big game guy, and he's fearless. That's the one quality he has. He's never given up. And all those days with the Rochester Dragons when we were sitting there trying to find a way to compete against the Toronto Rush, Quinlan never backed down. And he's now grown in his ability to shoot and have more discernible decisions. And he can do it from both sides, whether it's backhand or forehand. And he's a really tough, squirrely kind of guy to guard. And he'll sky you if he needs to. And so he can do it all.
I just think they're going to come out with confidence and belief tonight. Like, they're at home. It's a Thursday night. They're home fans.
That stadium's incredible.
It's a great stadium. They've taken care of business against Toronto this year. And I mean, Jacob Brissett has had a great season. And Christophe Tremblay-Joncas, and I haven't done the French pronunciations in a long time.
I think every one of them can throw righty and lefty somehow.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. And not righty-lefty like Carl Eckwurzel does it, like dangerous righty-lefty, with all due respect to Carl.
Yeah, well, I think it should be a fun matchup. What's weird about the whole thing is that it feels so disconnected from the rest of what is going on. And being here championship weekend, I mean, it's great to have this game tonight, but I'm sure they're eager to get back and start competing against the U.S. teams again. And it'll be a nice moment when we get to have that back, because it's going to mean that the borders are open and it's easy to travel again. And I look forward to that. But this is a nice little treat into the kind of the future of what it's going to look like. Like, is Montreal going to become they win tonight? Are they going to become a team that you have to think about in the East Division and wherever we end up divisionally in 2022?
I just know that, if you're Toronto and you have a history of beating Montreal, are you really going to lose to Montreal for a 6th straight time? And how are you going to feel if you're? I don't know. I'm taking the Royale, but I also look at it from that perspective with the Toronto Rush. It's hard to fathom them losing to Montreal. If they lose this game, I think we got to look at the balance power shifting a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
But it's also an unorthodox season in these still crazy times, and who knows?
Yeah, Charlie, thinking about what you said, I can't agree more. It's felt the most separated from Canada in the entire time I've known Ultimate. I lived in Seattle for a long time. We just played
Vancouver, right,
all the time. I mean, sectionals, regionals, nationals. I knew those guys better than I knew guys in California. And the interesting part, I think, going forward is at this game, we're seeing and we're going to see a lot of new names, but they're going to be guys that you're going to be seeing competing against the U.S. teams at the World Championships. I mean, they're going to be the guys. So this is sort of a little preview of what's to come. And I think it's going to be a bit of a surprise at just how good they are, and we're going to see it.
This is the only time I'll say it. Toronto, I miss you.
That's big. That's big coming from someone from New York.
So just come on down to Northeast Regionals. You can stay at Brian's place for a couple of weeks if you can't get back over the border, and
We'll see about that. Maybe I don't miss him that much.
we're going to get to the Royale and the Rush. I think the broadcast is going to begin momentarily, but time to make your championship weekend picks here in D.C. Give me your winner and who they're beating in the finals. Brian?
New York over Raleigh. Jack Williams to Ben Yacht. Win by 1.
By 1.
Double overtime again or regulation?
I think it's going to be regulation.
I'm also going to go New York over Raleigh. I think when it comes down to it, the big playmakers are going to show up. Atlantic.
I've gone back and forth, but my experience and my homerism, I gotta support some of the guys I've coached and dearly love. I gotta take Chicago over New York.
Wow. You think Chicago's going to win the title?
I do. I think
Can you
They've
tell them
got
me and
a
Charlie
lot
are
of-
from New York?
They've got a lot of talent. I mean,
It's
think
funny how this is going to work out because you guys are from New York, and
it's the thing about Chicago. It's really easy to say, oh, they play in a weak division, therefore they're going to be untested and they're going to lose. But actually, they're really good, and the reason that they dominated is because they're really good, and it is very plausible to me that they could win the title.
I mean, look,
I'd say that about every team except San Diego. I don't think San Diego can win, but
who haven't we mentioned tonight? Kurt Gibson.
yep.
I mean, he's gone unmentioned. He's a difference maker. I mean, he was a difference maker in their comeback against the wind chill. He's going to be the guys sort of brings that same natural calm presence in the biggest moments that I was talking about Nethercutt. I mean, he's a champion. He knows what to do in those big moments. And when he's a guy that we're not even mentioning on their team, got to go with him.
I got another question I want to ask y'all that I asked Brian earlier, but we're going to take you video-wise to a little bonus coverage of the Royale and the Rush Claude Robillard Stadium, and I think we have the technical ability to show you that video and keep talking over it for a bit. So they're talking about Cam Harris, the full game broadcast on AUDL.TV right now. I asked Brian this before. How many players on the 4 teams here in D.C., is it possible that at the end of the weekend we could say they were the best player on the field this weekend?
What do you think, Brian?
All right. Well, you start with Kirk Gibson, just with what Tyler was saying. I'll be honest, Paul Arders from Chicago. You can maybe pick out some other names. We know Yacht, Jack Williams, Ryan Oscar. Jeff Babbitt has the potential to have some big impacts. I don't know how we include him because of his defensive presence most of the time. You look at Raleigh, Eric Taylor. You could see somebody like Jacob Fairfax maybe having a big game. You could see Saul Yannick having a really big impact. Against San Diego, Jonathan Nethercutt, Bruce Helton, Travis Dunn. And then there are some other players that can have some big impacts, but I think that's the kind of the starting point for the list.
We talked about this a while ago in the show, but I just want to come back to it. Nethercutt, great big field player, and he's throwing to 2 super elite cutters. What a joy. Like, that's going to be so fun to watch. I don't know that New York's D-line, I mean, yes, they have Babbitt, but is it enough? They've got 2 guys they can go to. The timing's been really good. When they've looked good, they've looked great. I'm curious about how that New York defense is going to handle that matchup, especially with Nethercutt coming on so late in the season. You kind of have to throw out a lot of the other tape and just say, okay, what did they do in the playoffs against Dallas?
Well, I know the matchup I'd go right to, and that's Josue Laura, who had a huge block late in the game against Dallas in the championship game on Abe Coffin, and he's an elite handler defender. And I don't have any inside information here, but he's the guy who you pick to stop handlers. And so
Oh, absolutely.
Josue is going to be able to match the athleticism, but Nethercutt's taller, and that's going to be really interesting to see. It's going to come down to the mark, because a lot of times when you guard Nethercutt, you want to have a taller player on him because of those release points. And so that's a really great point that's going to be a pretty critical match. I think they're going to have somebody for Dunn. I think they're going to have somebody for Goose. I think they might have other people for somebody else, but Nethercutt is going to be pretty key in that game.
Can Jack guard Nethercutt?
It'd be wonderful to see. Nethercutt's ability in small space is fantastic. He just has such a feel for where the space is and how to position himself to make best use of it. Talking about players of the game, I think I'm most excited. I think we may see some names crop up that are not always in the big bright lights. I mean, Leo Gaval, you and I talked about him before. I think he stood out masterfully. And other teams
He's a great player, and he's been on this stage before. He won a title 2017 in Montreal with San Francisco.
And I think he's not somebody who's going to always be the guy that the other team game plans for, but gets it done. And I think other teams have some of these guys that, you know, one name that stood out to me, especially in some late game situations, is Noah Saul. I mean, he got stuff done. He made big throws. He doesn't have any fear of doing so. And he can make defensive plays. We saw it already. I think each team has some of these guys that they may end up being the one we remember for the big play, aside from maybe a crucial mistake from a superstar.
Charlie, I'm just looking at our Facebook live stream. We have Bruce from Albuquerque saying hello.
Oh, hello, Bruce.
We have gentlemen from
Mike.
the Philippines taking Goose and the Growlers. So
Over New York, or to win the whole thing?
to win the whole thing.
Okay.
So the Filipino audience, one viewer at the moment at least, is going with Goose. And
I have a quick thing I'll throw out there real quick, if we have time. Rank the offenses, rank the defenses this weekend. It's
Would you
interesting.
like to start?
I mean, I'm happy to throw out my thoughts here.
start it off.
I think offensively, I go number 1, New York, number 2, San Diego, number 3, Raleigh, number 4, Chicago. Defensively, I think I go number 1.
Did you say San Diego was one or New York was one?
I have New York 1, San Diego 2. Defensively, I go. It's a tough call here. I think Chicago 1, Raleigh 2, New York 3, San Diego 4.
I would tend to agree about the defensive lineup. I think Chicago's defense has a variability to do both a junky set that is unpredictable. Other teams, I think, have some junk, but it's not as scary. I mean, there's not as many times you need to kind of pump it and get worried. And they're person-on-person defense, I mean, top to bottom. And I would wonder about San Diego's ability to match up just top to bottom, line after line after line. Offensively, I think that's the one I'm most interested to see, because there have been times that all these offenses have looked pretty unstoppable, and there have been times that a lot of them have looked mightily stoppable.
That's very true.
I mean, New York has started some games, you know, even their last game, a lot of their turns came from errant throws.
Terrible.
They weren't even deep shots that weren't like that hung a little bit. They were like misses. Chicago's offense, you know, they turn over some dump throws that just it's weird. San Diego's offense, I think the question mark is like, how good is the division? And they have had up and down seasons. One thing with Raleigh, their offense to me has changed dramatically from the start of the season. Start of the season, it was tons of dink and dunk. I mean, it was really pretty. I love small ball, but it was like all small ball. And I think moving Eric Taylor over, opening it up a little bit. The offense, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think, because that to me that's the one place.
Let me just interject real quick. Over 1,200 people at Claude Robillard Stadium in Montreal tonight. With vaccine proof check and ticket check, many folks are still outside, so that's kind of the reason for the delay.
Got it.
Getting everyone in the stadium.
The U.S. Open was having this problem when they opened things up on the first day. In New York.
Sorry, go back to this conversation. I just wanted to interject and let people know when there's action from Canada, you'll see the opening few points here with us.
Safety first. We were just talking about. I had agreed with the defensive top to bottom, but talking about the offense, I had a lot of question marks. I mean, I would not feel that comfortable right now saying one offense is necessarily absolutely better than another. I think they all have a potential to be better than one another. It's a little bit of who shows up and how.
Yeah, it is really variable. And one of the things that, one thought that's come to mind recently and been coaching my own teams is that there's a nice saying from one of the ultimate legends, Steve Mooney, which is, we are the worst team at this tournament, and we are the best team at this tournament. And in this case, I think that applies to almost every single team, and especially New York, right? In thinking about this list, New York at times can be the absolute worst and start out the game like they did against Atlanta. But in the fourth quarter, like I said, I want the disc in Jack Williams' hands over anybody else in this championship weekend. And so from that perspective, it's like, I like New York in the fourth quarter, but I don't like them throughout the entire game to go through and just be able to pitch a perfect game. That's not going to happen. The team that seems the most capable of doing that, and you've talked about it already, in San Diego, they're playing like the best team. And like, to quantify that, it's like they're getting the most out of everybody in their roles.
Right.
Nobody's stepping outside of themselves against in that Dallas game. Everybody knows exactly what they need to do, and it's making them play really together and in a really like aesthetically pleasing fashion.
Yeah.
Like, it looks right. It feels right. It's not herky-jerky. You look at New York, you have errant throws, but you have big plays. You look at Raleigh, you have that small ball that early in the season that they couldn't connect handlers to cutters.
Right.
Like
They
Fairfax
can't hit their hucks.
Right, Fairfax has not been the same threat that he's been in past seasons. And we know he has that capability because he's incredibly fast.
I said the same thing about Fisher.
Right, exactly. And that was the one thing that was nice to see is that I thought Fisher and Terrence Mitchell for Raleigh had really great games against DC.
Yep.
Because it used to be you could just kind of force them the disc and just say, you know what, we'll like get Terrence Mitchell on the sideline, we'll get Henry Fisher, we'll just push him under. And it really looked like late in the game that they were comfortable hitting some big swings, just hitting just a little bit more outside of their range than they were used to. And that's pretty critical to make it so that you don't have to run through just Matthew Johannes, Yannick, Eric Taylor, and doing the small ball all the way up the field.
Well, that's what happened to DC.
Right.
They
Right.
couldn't get connectivity, and they
Right.
just completely bled the brakes and only scored 3 points in the fourth quarter.
And then it's like, how do you play Chicago? I think Chicago and New York are kind of they can be the best team and they can be the worst team. San Diego, you're going to get like a level performance. We know kind of exactly what we're going to get there.
I just wonder if that's where
Exactly, with the talent, it's like
Yeah.
they're going to get, New York's going to throw a lot of defenders at them. And
Yeah.
whoever wins Chicago Raleigh, let's say they get past New York, they're going to throw a lot of defenders at them. And we can see matchups kind of occurring. It's probably going to take an otherworldly performance by somebody on San Diego for them to be in the finals, and for them after that, for them to have a chance to win the championship.
Yeah, so in the first quarter, you take San Diego's offense. In the fourth quarter, you take New York's offense. And then the second two, you kind of divide between.
I haven't heard any rankings, by the way. Everybody's
One of our viewers gave his rankings. Nicholas says on offense, Empire, Flyers, Union, Growlers.
Growlers last in the offense.
Yeah.
Wow, I don't think I agree.
And then he said on defense, Flyers, Growlers, Empire, Union.
Interesting. Very different rankings than my own.
Well, I think it's really close, and I think there's this natural, like, oh, you're ranking them last. Like,
Well, right. These are all good teams.
they're all good teams.
These are all
and there's
very
not
good
a,
teams.
There's not a glaringly bad unit
Nope.
in there. And, like, is this a New York defense with Jack Williams and Ben Yacht crossing over?
Playing 40 points, yeah.
Or is it the New York defense with, just the normal Babbitt, and is Ben Katz on D, or is he playing like, we don't know that either.
He's going to play both.
He's going to play both.
He's
That's
going to
what I
play both.
said, Same thing.
Whenever I moved him to offense in 2019, he told me, I like O, but I also like D2, and I can play both.
Well, look, the other part that I think can be a worry is the recency bias for San Diego. Over the course of this season, I wouldn't say that they've had as strong of a season as some of the other teams. They had a wonderful game to finish out their season. And if we remember, a lot of the pundits were choosing Dallas to win that game. And
All
it's
of
because, all of them. And it's because Dallas had the experience. Dallas has proven it over again. And here comes San Diego, first quarter perfect, rest of the game holds strong. And I think adding Nethercutt helped, but what we saw is them stepping up into the big moment, and the worry would be, is there going to be a regression to the mean?
Of course.
And I think we talked about this early, tonight's, as a player, having experienced some of these, like, night before the game, it's one of my favorite moments in all of sports because it's rare. You only get a few of these in your life. And this moment, before everything has been written, books have been made, it's still all up in the air. But you just got to then reflect, like, what am I thinking? Where's my head at? How do we get our players in the right mindset? Because for San Diego, a lot of those players talked about that game was the biggest win for their team. You can't let that win be the end of the season. And you got to be thinking, we can also do this game. And I can tell you, some of those guys, Nethercutt, I know, Goose, I know, they've won a lot, but that's not true across the board.
I do think the fact that they made championship weekend 2 years ago helps them in that regard.
Sure.
They've been to this event before as an underdog, but maybe that was the happy to be there moment. I don't think they're going to be happy to be here. I think they believe that they are the best team in the league, the most balanced, the deepest, and the most top-level talent. I mean, top 10-level talent. You could argue that their top 10 is better than New York's top 10 while acknowledging that New York's top 3 are better than their top 3. Like, Goose at his best and Travis Dunn and Jonathan Nethercutt is a pretty good top 3. I don't think we'll compare them at the level of Yacht, Oscar, Williams, but it's not that far behind. It's probably the second best big 3 on an O-line at the tournament, right?
Offensively.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that makes New York's big 3 so dangerous is that Jack Williams is an incredible defender. Ben Yacht has proven to be a great defender after the turn. And, I mean, Oscar's more in that role that I would consider, like a Helton and a Dunn, where it's like more pure offense, but no slouch. I think that's the difference, is like the versatility. I don't know. Travis Dunn is an incredible offensive cutter, but is he the defender that those guys are? I don't think so. But they are. It's true, Evan. It's a very good top 3. It's very good.
Can we pull back up what's going on in Montreal right now? I think they're doing their player introductions. And
beautiful.
It is an unbelievable night here in D.C. And excited to, man, I can't wait to get back to Montreal and eat some poutine.
I don't need poutine after like 6 weeks on the road,
well,
but it does sound good. I would probably eat it if you put it in front of me right now.
I just love Montreal. Hey, Jean Levy.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, I think in terms of talent is the question for San Diego. And after giving it some thought, I think they have the lowest ceiling here. I think you've got to almost like, even though I've talked about how as a team they're playing really well, at their peaks, I think it's got to be New York number 1, Chicago after that, then Raleigh, who's had just like some shakiness, even though Raleigh and Chicago are really close, and then San Diego. They can play well, but their talent levels, I just don't think it's going to be able to match everybody else. Which is like, it's really hard to go into these games where not only, we talked about the happy to be here angle and like how big of a game this could be for San Diego, but also this feeling, do you have to play perfect to win? Because most teams don't play perfect, right? You talk about teams that have the talent where it's like even on their worst day, they find a way to eke out a victory because you just can't guarantee that everybody's going to play their level best.
New York just did that.
Right. And so for San Diego, if they're thinking in their heads, if any of those offensive players are saying, I've got to play out of my mind for us to win, like there's one player that can maybe do that, I think, and that's Nethercutt. If anybody else is thinking that they've got to extend their game, take more shots, take more risks, I think that spells doom for San Diego. They've got to be, and that's kind of the hard part, like when you can't judge that Western Division coming over with that talent perspective. Like, how is it going to be when they face that punch from New York?
Yeah.
Because New York is going to have those moments where they load up the line and they punch you in the face. And it's like, can you withstand that? And how do you react to that?
Yeah.
Who's your outlet in those situations? If they take away Goose and Dunn, like, Gaval's going to have to step up.
Yep.
But who else after that? You need that reset, right? When you stop Yacht, Oscar, and Jack Williams, which doesn't happen anyway, but let's say you did, then the other outlets you look at, like, that's why Shaw Talk is having such a great season. That's why Katz can be so dangerous from the handler space. And that's why John Lithio has been such a great alternate cutter for New York.
Sure.
I don't know that San Diego has that free reset or outlet they can go to if everybody else gets guarded.
The fun part about that, from the San Diego perspective, and I think this is a narrative standpoint, is the expectation isn't high for you. You get to go out there and just go at it. And I think when I sort of going back to and reflecting on what you just said, I was impressed with San Diego's choices on offense. I think, just like you said, staying, keep doing your role and do it well. Don't overextend. And I've been a part of teams that have succeeded mightily when there was not a lot of expectations. The nation, the talk of social media, talk of pundits was we would underperform, and it's freeing from a player perspective because you get to prove the doubters wrong. And I think they would probably love watching us say their ceiling is low or we don't expect them to win, because I mean it's just going to fire you up, right? Bulletin board material can come from anywhere. From the New York side, it's the opposite. It's right, like the expectations are extremely high, so that's a different narrative that you have to frame, and each team that's sort of a fun coaching challenge, is like what narrative do you take into this to get your players to go to bed and think in the right way.
You talked about this earlier with Chicago, right? The pregame speech for Chicago is not like calm and chill. It's going to be up here, and it's going to be intensity and energy. And that's where it's like, what is that balance for San Diego? Which is like, okay, we should be confident because we're great. Or like, we need to start out hot if you're New York. Like, it's just going to be reading this moment, and you just never know for sure which way it's going to go and what your team needs, because it's like, we know what Goose and Nethercutt are thinking. And you've talked about this. It's not only just the happy to be here angle, but it's like, for all of those players in San Diego, it can feel some pressure if they could be saying, you know what, we've got nothing to lose.
Right.
And that could be freeing.
Right.
But they could be saying, this is our chance.
Yeah.
This is our one chance. And that's a very different feeling. And you just don't know how it feels. It's kind of almost like written after the fact. You play the game,
Yep.
and then you're like, oh yeah, I was feeling that nerves, I was feeling that doubt,
Exactly.
and that's what got me. But you just never know. And that's what's great about sports. You don't know what's going to happen. And you don't know how, like, those early points, Goose talked about this, right? Where like if an early point against Dallas doesn't go their way, if a bobble doesn't go the right way for San Diego, maybe they feel differently. Like if they come out and get punched in the face, then all of a sudden that confidence can drain away.
I think in that San Diego most recent win to get them here, they interviewed Goose mid-game, and he talked specifically about where their energy level was. He was like, we're right at the right spot, and we'll see who's at the right spot here. It looks like we're about to kick off.
Finally, at the 7 o'clock start, they're going to be 26, 27 minutes late, but Montreal's going to pull. We'll watch the first couple points with you here on Facebook Live, and then AUDL.TV, your destination. The first ever Canada Cup is underway. Toronto begins on offense, and Cam Harris in Toronto's last game threw for 730 yards and was 8 for 8 on hucks, which is pretty insane.
It's insane. He's been playing at this level for a decade.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
He's one of the most naturally talented players in the game. Like, he's been just that since he was 19.
Just gifted, yeah.
A lot of new faces for the Rush this year. I mean,
going deep.
that
okay.
was quick.
Rush pick looking good. 1 point in.
But Adrian Yearwood is coaching now, and Thompson McKnight hasn't played all that much. Isaiah Massey-Kelly and Jeff Powell haven't been huge factors. But they got kind of the next guard, the McKenzie brothers, Ian and Mike, and Nathan Hurst, and Phil Turner, who we saw glimpses of defensively in 2019. So, look, I think even if Toronto loses tonight, we'll got to look at them as a competitive contender coming into 2022. They'll have a renewed sense of enthusiasm. That's why I find this so fascinating tonight, because Montreal went 4-0 against them in the regular season. They should win this game. They shouldn't even have to play this game.
It's a little bit like Dallas and San Diego, right? Like, everybody was picking Dallas throughout the season, even though San Diego was leading the division and winning some of those games.
Come on, camera.
You kind of have to, when you're the little brother, you gotta dethrone the king when it matters.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Brian, how important is this singular point right here to not fall behind 2-0?
Okay.
Well, they're not going to. It doesn't look like it, but I never read too much into that. You got to be calm if you're Montreal in this instance, because if you get broken, it's so early. There's no reason to freak out about anything, and they got off to a great start anyway.
Toronto pick looking a little shaky after point 2.
Charlie, though, wants to react.
First goal for Sasha Płatzakolski. He's had a lot of. We'll watch one more point, and then we'll say good night and toss you over to AUDL.TV. Our coverage starts at 3 o'clock tomorrow with our Game Day Live show, live at Audi Field. Ian Toner and Megan Tormey will be here as well. Daryl Stanley, coach of the DC Breeze, will be joining us on the Game Day show, and also at halftimes of our game broadcast, and just super excited for the weekend we've got in store here in Washington, D.C. The weather looks perfect. The teams are fired up, and man, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to be here.
Stadium looking sharp.
Hopefully the fans show out tomorrow. You know, it's with DC not making it. There's a little skepticism, but I hope the Breeze fans will still show out. And I mean, I've heard stories about people traveling from San Diego and Chicago, and you know, we met someone on the rooftop bar here last night that was super excited to potentially check out the AUDL over at Audi Field. So it's going to be a special weekend for sure.
Yeah, I think it's even worth just noting how wonderful it is to even have this happening. I mean, to be sitting up here, you think back 9 months ago, people were questioning whether we should cancel the entire season.
I know.
For the entire year, and here we are sitting. I mean, what a treat.
And the technology. We're watching a game on a monitor, sitting on a couch on a roof.
It's unreal.
Well, kudos to our production crew, Ultiworld hosting our game day live shows, Aiden Shapiro Layton, Lindsay Sue, Charlie, your technological expertise is well-renowned. And look at that, the graphic is up there. You can watch the rest of the game on AUDL.tv. We'll be doing so as well as we get some dinner. Gotta go get my computer charger because it's been on my lap this whole time, but I'll get the game on for us. And we will see you tomorrow over at Audi Field. Championship weekend number 10. The New York Empire and the San Diego Growlers get the day started at 4 o'clock after our game day live show at 3. And then the Raleigh Flyers and the Chicago Union, the nightcap at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. For Brian Jones, Charlie Eisenhood, Tyler Kinley, and our entire production crew, I'm Evan Lepler. Enjoy the Canada Cup. We'll see you tomorrow here from Championship Weekend in Washington, D.C.